Merry meet. Happy Imbolc, everyone. The wheel turns once again, bringing us to Imbolc, that great fire festival of the Celts, sometimes called Candlemas. After its Christianized name, this is a Sabbath that's about finding that light within during the darkness, that spark of light that keeps us sustained and keeps us going through the rest of the winter. And while Imbolc may be a lesser holiday, standing in the shadows of Beltane and Samhain, more common holidays that people know, nevertheless is a very, very powerful time where we can do sympathetic magic, fire magic, dedicate ourselves to our paths, or rededicate ourselves to a current one. So all of this and more we're going to be talking about today. Hi, I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. And we are here to talk about Imbolc today. So if you're with me live, you can go ahead and drop any comments or questions in the feed. I will get to all the questions at the end during the Q&A. And if you like this video and you like what you're hearing and watching, definitely like the video or give it a heart just so we get it to more people. It shows up in more feeds the more likes we have. So Imbolc, I'm going to just jump in and we're just going to talk about the origins of Imbolc and a little bit of the background. And Tanessa's with us tonight. Hi there. Good to see you. So Imbolc derives from the word oimelc, and this is translated to a couple of different things. One translation is ewe's milk, so ewe as in the animal, the female sheep. The ewes and other milk-bearing animals were often honored at Imbolc because they provided sustenance during that time of the winter when our ancestors didn't have much, especially those of us who have ancestors who lived in these colder climates. Our ancestors celebrated Imbolc because of this idea of running low in the pantries, this idea of needing to get through a winter that it sometimes felt like it was never ending. So there is always that question that they had, will this be enough? Now, we as modern witches, we don't experience lack in quite that kind of way, but still we can take a lot and learn a lot from how our ancestors lived and where this holiday comes from. This also helps explain all of that different types of weather divination that takes place during this time of the year. For example, in the United States, Groundhog's Day. Across the world, there are different weather divination systems that were done, often involving animals. And these would have been very, very important to our ancestors because they would show how much more winter there was left to endure. Now, there is a second translation to the word Imbolc, and it also has several different meanings. This translation is in the belly. So, probably where this one comes from is at this time, our ancestors were doing husbandry with their animals, and so many of these animals would actually be pregnant at this point, around February 1st, February 2nd. Now, I think what's interesting though is there is a deeper meaning to this translation in the belly. So if we think about the earth as the personification of the goddess, underneath the surface of the earth at this time, there is that quickening, that the seeds that have been planted or seeds that have made their way down deep into the earth that may not have been planted by human hands. And though they are not germinating, they're not sprouting, and in most places there really isn't any sign of this new rebirth yet. Nevertheless, it's underneath the surface. It's inside the belly of the goddess. So to me, metaphorically, this speaks to this idea of what could be in our own bellies. What do we hunger for? What do we want to produce in this waxing half of the year? So even though it doesn't really feel necessarily like it's waxing, maybe the days start to feel a little bit longer and it's a little bit warmer. Many places it's still quite cold. But nevertheless, what is in our belly? What do we hunger for? What seeds or seed do we want to plant during this waxing half of the year? So this is something I just kind of leave you to ponder with. What seeds would you want to plant? Now, let's talk about the astrological impact of this holiday. So, Imbolc is a cross quarter day, which means that it falls between a solstice and an equinox. Hi, we've got some more people joining us. Carla, Mary. Hi, it's good to see you guys. So in this case, Imbolc is falling between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Now, traditionally, in the northern hemisphere, we celebrate Imbolc on sundown at February 1st, which literally here in California, where I am, it is literally just sundown right now. So this is the beginning of Imbolc. And then it usually is celebrated until the sundown on February 2nd. Now, while that is the traditional observance of the holiday, in reality, because it's a cross quarter day and because the solstices and the equinoxes change year to year, that means that the cross quarter day changes too. So its date is changing. It's a different day every year. So this particular year, astrological Imbolc is actually falls between Friday the 3rd and Saturday the 4th. And it really does depend on where you live. So if you're more in on the eastern side of the Atlantic, it would be more like the 4th for you. If you're here in the United States, it would be the 3rd. Now, last year, those dates were a little bit later. It was actually the 4th and the 5th of February. So I really like to observe Imbolc on the exact date that it is astrologically the midpoint. But again, the Imbolc, like all of the other Sabbats, is actually more of a season than a single day. So every Sabbath, I always see people posting, or people actually ask me, they felt like they missed it because they didn't get to observe it right on that very day. But what I always say is you have plenty of time. This is just the beginning. February 1st is literally just the beginning of Imbolc season. And we have a good 4 or 5 weeks before we start to transition into that Ostara spring equinox energy to really celebrate and settle into this holiday. So no, you've not missed it if you don't do anything tonight. So what I really like about Imbolc is this fire energy to it. The earth is waxing, the wheel of the year, the energy is waxing. So we're kind of on this upswing of energy, even though, like I mentioned before, in some places it may not be quite as obvious. Now, I live in Southern California where we don't really have a lot of change of seasons, though we do. Those who live here know there is a change of season, maybe not as pronounced as some of the colder climates. But when I lived in Boston, and this is when I was first becoming a witch and discovering that I was a witch, and I remember so many Imbolcs so fondly. It was always my favorite of all the Sabbats because there's just something about a Boston winter which is so cold, and sometimes you couldn't go out for days, and the idea of just lighting candles and we would fill my bedroom with candles, and I'd cast a circle, and my friends and I would do our Imbolc rituals together. And there's just some beauty in that I just can never escape that feeling. So here in more southern climates, we still feel that energy, maybe not as pronounced, but is nevertheless there. So Imbolc is a great time to really just bring that light and that warmth in, especially if you're going through some hard times. Those of us who live in more of those northern climates where the sun doesn't come out very much, like Boston, the sun was out much less than it was hidden much more than it was out. And some of us are suffering from seasonal affective disorder. This may be a part of the winter that you feel really down. And lighting those candles and bringing that warmth and that light into your space can have a really profound effect right now. Now, Imbolc also coincides with several other holidays across different cultures. I'm mainly going to talk about Candlemas because it is the Christianized version of Imbolc, and it's quite actually interesting where it all comes from. Now, Candlemas, even I was asking my boyfriend last night, he was raised Catholic, he'd never even heard of Candlemas, but it is a Catholic holiday that is in their system, so not all Catholics celebrate it, but some do. And where this all comes from is it was very, very difficult for the Christian church to convert all of the pagans across the countryside when the conversions were taking place. And what happened is they would have to absorb certain of the practices, certain holidays, certain gods and goddesses, bring them into the Catholic Church in order to get that conversion from the people. The Imbolc was always associated with the Celtic fire goddess Brigid. She's a goddess of fertility and childbirth. She's a goddess of creativity. She's the patron of smith working, so metalworking. She is a goddess of poetry, of purification. She's also a triple goddess, which means that in different forms she can be the maiden, the mother, and the crone, or all together at one time. So it was said that she was born on February 1st. And so because of that, Imbolc was always tied to her. Now, the Christian church could not get rid of her. She was a very, very, very popular goddess, and they couldn't get rid of Imbolc because of that being her holiday. So they simply absorbed all of this into their own system and called it Candlemas. Now, there are a lot of connections to it because at Candlemas, there are many candles that are lit. There is this idea of kind of sustaining ourselves through the winter, bringing in the warmth and the light. But nevertheless, as she was absorbed, she was not absorbed as a goddess. I forgot to mention that. She was actually absorbed as a saint, becoming one of the most popular female saints, Saint Brigit. And she's so popular that there is actually a day to her, dedicated to her. February 1st is Saint Brigit's Day. And I read, well, actually, my friend sent me this article, and it said that today, or this year, 2023, is the first year that Saint Brigit's Day is going to be a bank holiday in Ireland. So you can see the popularity of this goddess, whether she appears in her goddess form or in her saint form. Now she is so synonymous. Pronounced Brigit, sometimes Breed, other times. She is so synonymous with Imbolc to the point that many people will not really honor any other deities at Imbolc than her. Now my own coven, which is very eclectic, will honor deities from various pantheons throughout all of the wheel of the year. But rarely, only one time, I was just thinking about this earlier, only one time in the past 12 years have we honored any other deity besides Breed at Imbolc. And that was Pele, because we were doing, again, kind of tying into that fire holiday. Now, it doesn't mean you cannot honor other deities at Imbolc. It's just she's almost so synonymous that most people don't. Now, at the end, I'll give you some ideas if you wanted to work with some other deities at this time. But for now, let's talk about some Imbolc activities. So keep in mind that you do not have to do these today or tomorrow or even the 3rd or the 4th. You've got good 4 to 5 weeks to really settle into this energy, and maybe you'll find something interesting in this list. Maybe something you can do in the next couple of days, and then other things you can do over the course of the next couple of weeks. So the first thing I want to talk about is sympathetic magic. Because this holiday it lends itself so well to sympathetic magic, and it really was what our ancestors were using this particular time of the year for. Now, our ancestors used the space of Imbolc in order to invite, you might even say to coax, to kind of persuade the sun to come back. So now remember, if we're going back very, very far, where some of these traditions go, there wasn't the modern science that we have. Today we know that despite the coldness, the darkness, we know the sun is always returning. We know there's going to be a harvest this next year. We know that the cycles will continue. But our ancestors, especially those that go further back, they didn't know this. And so for them, they felt that it was very much necessary for them to do sympathetic magic in order to invite the sun back, persuade it to come back. We need you. And so that is one type of magic that would have been done at this time. Now, modern witches, of course, we know that our magic is not necessary in order to bring back the sun, but I do think that there is this beauty in performing sympathetic magic nevertheless, because we do live in a collective that has become very, very disengaged and unattached from the natural world. And so us as witches, I believe one of our reasons for being here, incarnating, at this time, is to reestablish that connection to nature, to the wheel, to the cycles of the seasons. And one way we can do that is through our sympathetic magic. Now, here's a couple ideas about how you can use sympathetic magic at Imbolc. The first one is the simplest one, and it's right in the name Candlemas. You simply light as many candles as you can and fill your room, turn off the lights, any of the artificial lights, and really just spend time in the darkness with those candles lit. And, kind of, I think about that time back, all those years back in Boston when we would do that same thing and that magic that we would feel when we were doing it. Another thing that you can do is perform candle magic. So if you have a spell that you want to do right now, and there's many different modalities of how a person could do a spell, candle magic is just one of them. But it's a really good time to use candle magic in your spell working right now. And then for those of you who are really into like meditative and contemplative practices, candle gazing is perfect right around this time. Now, other ways that we can do sympathetic magic is, of course, we can honor Brigid. We can invite her into our homes, and you can invite her in as that maiden form, so that goddess who's inside the earth, in the belly, right? The seeds that are being held in that space before they're fertilized. We can also honor her as the triple goddess in her form, which represents the life and the death and the rebirth, the cycle of the seasons. That reminds us that there will be this return of a spring goddess. The winter will end, not only physically here, but also for us emotionally. If we're going through some dark times right now, working with a fire goddess like Brigid is very good. Now, a couple of other things you can do to work with Brigid is to create a Brigid dolly, and I really wish that I had one here. I've made one before. I couldn't find that, and I couldn't find my Brigid's cross. But you could certainly Google this, and I'll just explain a little bit about it. But the Brigid's dolly or doll is made typically out of corn husks. Sometimes they were the corn husks that were left over from the Lunaza ritual, which is all the way on the other side of the wheel and shares some similarities to Imbolc. So whereas Imbolc is kind of that beginning of the planting season where we're beginning to kind of plant the seeds in our minds, the Lunaza is the beginning of the harvest season all the way on the other side of the wheel. Now, traditionally, the Brigid's doll, who may or may not have been made from the Lunaza corn husks, but traditionally that doll would be placed in a bed near the fire. And sometimes she was called the bride too. So sometimes you'll hear or you'll see in writings that people have this tradition, even though they didn't really know what it was connected to, but they would make this doll, place it in a bed and place it by the fire. And basically what this is putting her, the bride, in a place where that god would come in and he will fertilize her in the spring. So it's basically fertility magic for the land and sympathetic magic at that. So another thing that you can do is you can make a Brigid's cross. So a Brigid's cross looks very much like a Celtic cross. It's an even-armed cross. It's typically made out of wheat straws, or I will say that more modern pagans, and we have done it ourselves like this, we've used pipe cleaners. You can also use regular straws, but they don't bend like pipe cleaners do. Pipe cleaners are actually really good at this. And so you basically make this even-armed cross, and it represents the sun, it represents fertility, it represents luck, and the abundance of life. And it's thought if you hang this somewhere in your house, it basically blesses the home, and then it encourages light and luck and love into all those who live there. So it's a really neat project to make. Like I said, my coven has done these before. And if you're interested in doing one, just Google it. You'll find directions. They're actually really, really easy to make. Now, I mentioned this before about planting metaphorical seeds, or planting these metaphorical seeds in our mind, or that idea of the seeds within the belly of the goddess, within the belly of the earth. And so this is a good time for you to start really thinking about how you're going to use the energy of the waxing half of the cycle. So we're already six weeks into this. It began at Yule, and now we're 6 weeks in at Imbolc, and we have a good, 4.5 weeks or 4.5 months left of this waxing half till we get to its height at Litha. But what are you going to use this part of the wheel for? So really thinking about what seeds will you then fertilize at Ostara and Beltane. And again, like I said, this is metaphorical. So what is it that you want to draw into your life? Your seeds are the thoughts that start this process. We don't have to wait till the time to, do this magic at Beltane or Astara. We start to think about it right now. What will it be like? What are you drawing in? What are you going to need to shift in your life in order to make that happen? This is the planning stages right now. So another thing that we can do at Imbolc is consecration. So this is very, very popular. So our coven often will do consecrations at Imbolc, and this could be consecrations of tools that you've received. It can be consecrations of tools that you've been using that just kind of need to be purified and cleaned for the next part of the year, or brand new tools, a new tarot deck that you got. And basically, what it means when we consecrate something is it's simply us ceremoniously saying, I set this item aside for magical use, or I set this aside for a spiritual use. So, for example, some people will use just a common kitchen knife for their athame, and that is absolutely okay. But when we bring it into the circle and we consecrate it and we say, I'm setting this aside and I'm making this a magical tool, it adds on that extra layer. So consecrations can be really great. Now, I have a video that I will post later this week or early next week that shows a consecration that you can do at home. It's very simple, and I consecrate a tool. I think it's an athame using the 5 different elements, and it's something easy that you can do as well. If you don't want to wait till then, though, just Google if you don't know how to do consecrations, and there's lots of information out there. But it simply just is a way to bless and dedicate a tool or a ritual item. Now, kind of piggybacking off of that is this idea of dedication and rededication. So Imbolc is a big time for dedications and rededications. So my coven has new members join. I like to do initiations around Imbolc in that kind of Imbolc season, because it just lends the energy of this holiday lends itself so well to an initiation. Many people will dedicate themselves. So, for perhaps you're a newer witch and you're just getting started, this is a great time to really just dedicate yourself to the path. Maybe there's a deity that you've been interested in working with. You can dedicate yourself to that deity. Or if you don't have one, just simply dedicate yourself to the path. If you are a witch who's been around for a while, this is also a good time to rededicate yourself, to really sit down and say, this is my path and this is the direction that I'm headed. Now, people will also take oaths or vows during this time as part of that dedication or rededication process. So personally, in my coven, I love taking elemental vows, and I'm going to talk more about that at the end and give you an opportunity to be inviting you to a ritual that we're going to be doing on Friday where we're going to do just that. But just know that dedication and rededication is just a very special process where you can kind of use this energy, this universal energy of Imbolc, to really dedicate yourself to your path at this time. Now, another thing that goes really well with Imbolc is purification and cleansings of any kind. So our ancestors fasted during this time, and the reality of that is this fasting was not really a spiritual fasting necessarily. It was this idea that the pantries were getting very low, as I mentioned before, and fasting and eating less during this stretch of time before the spring became necessary for many people. Now, as modern witches, we don't have the necessity of having to fast like that. Some may choose to do so regardless for various reasons, but we don't have to do it. So there are other ways, though, that we can bring in that energy of purification. So we could do purifying breath work. So if you've never done breath work before, now is a great time to start. It's so purifying for the body and for the mind. We can do purifying mantras. So mantras are hand gestures that actually brings certain energy into the body and can purify certain areas of us. That is a great way to bring kind of purifying energy in. We can do a purifying bath, a ritual bath of some kind. We could do abhyanga massage, which is a form of self massage where you take oils, typically a like a sweet almond oil, and you might put drops of essential oil in it, and then you actually give yourself a very I want to say long because sometimes it takes a while, but you basically massage all parts of your body and really get in touch with your physical body. And this can be very, very purifying for our physical body. So bringing in kind of purification can be great. People also like to do house cleansings or child blessings or home blessings at this time. This is just a way to really start move some of that stuck and stagnant energy that is in the home that kind of gets stuck in that winter time, kind of move that out so there's space for that new energy that is coming in. And then another thing that's really good to do at Imbolc is anything having to do with creativity. It is a fire holiday. It is connected to that goddess Brigid, who is a goddess of creativity, inspiration, poetry, craft workers. So if you are somebody who is a creative person and wants to kind of add, add on to your creative energy, doing a spell for creativity can be really good right now. And if you feel like you're not a creative person, but you want to be, doing a spell for creativity can be really, really optimal at this time of Imbolc. Now, if you would like to build an altar, altars are, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but traditional colors for an Imbolc altar would be red, gold, and silver. So, like colors of the sun, and then that red color of I look at it as the red color of the root chakra of the earth. That's what I really look at it as. You can also think of it as kind of that red of blood, which is the fluid that like sustains us because it's inside of us. It keeps us alive. But you can decorate your altar with those colors. I mentioned earlier that I would talk about other deities that you can work with. So any deity, like basically the deity archetype of Imbolc is the fire, typically the fire or the sun goddess. Now there aren't a lot of sun goddesses. There are a lot more sun gods than there are sun goddesses across the pantheons, but there are a lot of fire goddesses. And a few that are really good to work with would be Brigid, like we mentioned, Hestia and Vesta. So that is the Greek and the Roman version of the goddess of the hearth and the home. So this is a fire holiday, so our ancestors would kind of gather around that fire. And Hestia and Vesta are really good, Hestia or Vesta are really good to work with at this time, especially if you're going to do a home blessing or some kind of a cleansing of the home, maybe a blessing of a child would be good. Freya is a great fire goddess to work with right now, and Sekhmet is also very, very good. So I also wanted to mention because each Sabbath is tied to where it is, not only where it is in the wheel of the year, but also where it is in this lunar cycles. So I always like to look at not only, where is the sun because we're at this Sabbath, but where is the moon right now? And here's the beautiful part about this Imbolc. Imbolc is, like we said, traditionally celebrated like today to tomorrow. Astrologically, it's really like Friday to Saturday. And then on Sunday is the full moon. Not only is it a full moon, but it's a full moon in Leo, which is again a fire sign. So there's so much fire energy right now, which is lending so much power to this Imbolc. And so I really hope that you could take advantage of it because this is a really, really good one. Now, it doesn't mean that so let's say Imbolc fell when we were in like a waning moon. It doesn't mean that that's a bad Imbolc. But this one, when those kind of cycles line up, waxing energy of the sun, waxing energy of the moon, not only that, but into a full moon, it's just like it couldn't be better. This is just about as good as we could get for Imbolc. So that being said, I would like to mention, before I get it, I'm going to look and see if there's any questions that anybody's got, but I have a ritual that I'm putting on with my maiden from my coven, Beth, and we are going to put this ritual on. We're hosting it as Body, Mind, Witchcraft and our Coven of Midnight's Flame. And we would like to invite everyone to this ritual. So, as I mentioned, we are going to be taking elemental vows. So our coven has done this ritual many, many, many times in the past. We have done it in person most of the time. When the pandemic began, our coven went online, so we actually took this ritual online, and we do a really good job of it online. But up until now, we've never done this ritual in the public. It's always been closed to our very, very small coven. This year, we're bringing it to all of you. And during this ritual, we are going to honor the goddess Brigid, and we are going to honor her in her triple goddess aspect. And then we're going to work with elemental energy. So there's a lot of things we're going to do that is really fun. And we are going to work with the energetic balance of our elements. So I'm going to teach you mudras for all of the elements. We are going to kind of check in, and we're going to commune with all of the elements. And through that communion, we are going to discover places where we would like to bring in that specific elemental energy. And then through that, we are going to write a series of elemental vows that will then burn and send off to the universe using that fire energy. And these vows will guide us for perhaps the next 6 months until till the waning half of the year, but will help guide us to kind of come to our highest potential, really follow through with our desires, and really make sure that we're on the path that we want to be. So it is like one of my, I have to say, I don't want to say it's my absolute favorite ritual of all time, because I like a lot of rituals that we've done, but this is always been one of my favorites. And I'm just so excited to be able to invite all of you to it. So if you are interested in joining us, I know that some of you on here are already joining us for it. But if you are interested in joining us, you can get a ticket to this through Eventbrite. I will drop a link below here in the comments, but you'll also find some in our floating around in our Body Mind Witchcraft group. And if you're on the mailing list, you'll also get a link there. It will take you to the Eventbrite page where you can donate to get a ticket, and it will take as little as $1. It just helps us put on these rituals. And then you will get sent a Zoom link, and a little bit later, probably later tonight or tomorrow, I'll be sending everyone a list of a few things to gather for the ritual. So I hope that you can join us. If you do want to come, but you know that you can't come, I should say the ritual is Friday, February 3rd at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you can't come at that time, no worries, just get a ticket, and then immediately afterwards, I send everybody a link with the replay, and you can do the ritual in your own time. All right, so hope you will join us. And I see that we've got a couple people here saying hi. And then Carla, she said I could dedicate myself to the path. Absolutely. This is like the perfect time to do a dedication. I myself dedicated it on Litha morning rather than Imbolc, but I was very young and I didn't know what I was doing. But Litha, any time is a good time to dedicate. But this is a very, very good time to dedicate. So you've come to it at the perfect time. So does anybody have any other questions for me before I sign off? And if not, you may think of some later, and always you can feel free to drop those in the chat. I go through the chat later, and I just see if there's any questions there for me to answer. All right, well, I am going to sign off for now, but I hope that you guys have a very blessed Imbolc. We're in it right now. The season has begun. So use this inspiration of this fire energy to really, supercharge your magic and the path that you want to be on, and use it to create what you want, because we are in that waxing half of the year where anything is possible. All right. Yes, okay, before I go, someone said, can you explain veiling, please? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by veiling. Do you mean shielding? And if not, maybe you could drop more in here. Carla said, thank you. Thank you for coming, Carla. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what veiling is. If maybe it refers to shielding, or there are the veils between the worlds. But you can always drop more information in the comments, and I'll come answer that later. Okay. All right. I will see you all later. Until next time. Happy Imbolc and blessed be.